TV2 Sports Talk on DMG Channel 2, your home for our high school football preview for the 2015 season this week. I'm Bill Morgan, happy to be joined in the opening segment of the show by our television play-by-play voice of high school sports on TV2, Scott Robinson. Scott, I don't know, I suppose this is something guys that get older say. Where has the majority of the summer gone, and what is high school football season doing here already?
Yeah, you know what? It seems like it comes faster and faster every single year. And, it's always exciting, that first game. You just never know what you're going to have. And then you see the progression of these teams as they go through the regular season. And it becomes very, very exciting as you get toward the end. And then they start to determine who's going to make the playoffs and who's not. And it makes for some great football.
Scott, certainly one of the things we've talked about in the past on these preview shows specifically is if you go back 20 years, it was sort of rare that we would get a team from Tuscarawas County into the playoffs. Certainly it was even more rare that they would win a game and advance to the postseason, but going back 3 years or so ago when Dover went to the state semifinals, certainly we now see progression in terms of making runs into the postseason. I guess what are the differences now between teams getting in simply and making runs and winning games in the postseason?
Well, I think the football's a lot better. Some would argue that. I think the situation to get into the playoffs has been expanded, so that makes it a little bit easier. If you can combine a lot of computer points, you get yourself up in that #1 spot. And then you play a team that maybe just squeaks in at #8, create some mismatches in the first round, so you move on again. Then you get the second round game, and then you get into opponents that you probably haven't played, then you've only scouted. Then it's anybody's ball game. It's funny though, the perennial powers, the ones with consistent coaching and that have had a program in place for a long period of time, always seem to do better no matter who they play. It's just because they're used to their system, they're ready to go, they're well coached, and the cream of the crop always rises at the end of the season.
When you talk about cream of the crop, of course, locally among the bigger schools, the Dover Tornadoes have ridden the crest of that wave for several years, New Philadelphia having made it into the postseason as well. And Scott, when we talk about Dover, which will be the first game that you guys cover on TV2 as they host Cleveland Central Catholic in week 1, probably for the first time, I guess, in recent memory, if you want to say that, they would appear to have more challenges, at least than a Dover program would normally have. Great success the last several years, graduating a ton of seniors this past campaign.
Well, certainly. Coach Dan Ift has been upgrading those first 5 games for quite a while now, and this year he's really put together quite a schedule with Nordonia. You've got Steubenville, you've got Lake. You start out with Cleveland Central Catholic. Then you've got Southeast in there, I believe, in week 5. That's really where the Tornadoes are going to make and break it. That, along with the New Philly game at the end of the year, certainly that's where a majority of the points are going to come from. Playing at Coshocton or at Cambridge doesn't necessarily gain them a lot of points unless they happen to have a good year, and then that just bolsters the total and makes it a little bit easier for Dover to move up through the playoff rankings. Those first 5 weeks are really going to tell the story, I think, for the Dover Tornadoes.
When we sort of skip around and talk among like the IVC schools, and of course we're going to see a shift in the next couple of years with teams from the ECOL going to the IVC, other teams coming into the Inter-Valley Conference. I guess first and foremost, the Garaway Pirates have made a tremendous run under head coach Jason Wallach over the last several campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason Wallach's done a great job with the Garaway Pirates, and certainly he's got some kids coming back as RJ Jacobs is coming back at quarterback. The Pirates really used his talents to great effect last year. I think they finished, 11-1, I think is what their season mark was last year, and did some damage in the playoffs there. So certainly the Garaway Pirates are one of those teams. You look at the Indian Valley Braves, another team. Matt Lancaster's done a great job with Indian Valley over the last few years. They've really built that program and started to move up into an annual playoff contender. They're another one. New Philadelphia. We haven't talked much about the Quakers of Matt Dennison yet, but the Quakers have done very well. They seem to get into the playoffs on a fairly regular basis. So you got 4 or 5 teams in the area that really are very competitive throughout the regular season, and that propels them then into the playoffs.
It is all a part of our high school football preview for 2015 on TV2 Sports Talk. I'm Bill Morgan, talking with our play-by-play voice on TV2, Scott Robinson. And Scott, as we talk about football itself, you mentioned in the opening part of this segment how the game has changed. And when you talk about the Garraway offense that they now run, the Dover offense that they run, certainly with that whole wide open look, much different than the wing tee that so many teams used to run around here for years and years.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's gone from a ground game to a passing game, and I think that's probably the majority now. You know, back in the 80s and 90s when I first came onto the scene, teams probably ran it 4 or 5 times every time they threw the football, and it was only if they got in 3rd and long that they ever considered even throwing the football. Now it's just the opposite. You know, they throw the ball all the time. Certainly, it's been very effective for teams that have the athletes and have developed the athletes over time and have been able to implement that type of system offensively very successfully.
Scott, as we wrap up our conversation, certainly something else that maybe has changed since you came on to the scene here locally, and since I came about, 15 years ago. The media coverage, which is what we're doing right now, continues to explode and expand. At any one time at a particular game, there's TV2. There might be another TV entity there. There's certainly print media there. There's multiple radio stations there. There's sometimes internet-only broadcast. Why do you think the interest specifically in high school football, not that it's not there for basketball, but not to the degree football, why does it just continue to grow and expand?
Well, you know what, I think football is kind of our sport. You know, I think that's really a big thing. I think high school football is one of the most pure forms of entertainment you can have. These kids have nothing to gain but pride in their performance. You know, they want to do well, they want to please their parents, they want to please their friends, they want to win. No question about that, and they certainly have been able to do that in many cases. You know, I just think it's a terrific game. It's a lot of fun to watch. It's really evolved into players that are very, very skillful. Although if you talk to people that played in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, everybody thinks they had the best teams, right? They had the best teams, the best offense, the best defense, the best players. And an argument can be made for every generation. But certainly I think that the fans here just really love their high school sports, and football comes out on top of that.
Scott Robinson will have the play-by-play call all season long right here on TV2, beginning Friday night, August 28th, as Dover plays host to Cleveland Central Catholic. More on our TV2 Sports Talk High School Football Preview Edition with Roger Metzger and Jim Haynes from the Times Reporter coming up next.
Well, I woke up to the sound of silence and cars were cutting like knives in a fist fight. And I found you with a tear in your eye, your head in the curtains and heart like the 4th of July.
You swore and said, we are not shining stars. This I know, I never said we are. If you're lost and alone, or you're sinking like a stone, carry on. May your past be the sound of your feet upon the ground. Carry on. Carry on, carry on. We are shining stars. Carry on, carry on. We are who we are.
This episode of Sports Talk is brought to you by J. Dempson and Son Concrete. After this rough winter, you may need to repair or replace your patio, sidewalk, steps, or driveway. If you're considering any of these projects, give J. Dempson and Son Concrete a call at 330-795-0169 for a free estimate. Keep your home looking its best with J. Dempson and Son, with over 55 years of combined experience making satisfied customers. TV2 Sports Talk, our high school football preview edition, continuing on DMG Channel 2 from Time Warner Cable. We've talked a little broadcast high school football media with Scott Robinson. Happy to be joined now by the sports editor for the Times Reporter, Roger Metzger, seated right smack dab in the middle. That is the rose between two thorns. To Roger's right is sports writer from the TR, Jim Haynes. Roger, we'll begin with you. We were talking with Scott Robinson about the fact how football locally seemingly has progressed. Used to get into the point where we had one team, a couple of teams make the playoffs but not win games. now, and maybe last year wasn't the best example in the world, but in recent years, we've had teams, Dover go to the state semifinals, Malvern went to the state semifinals several years back. The difference between teams getting in and teams actually winning in the postseason.
Well, I mean, to get in is a feat in itself. I mean, you've got to be a really decent team to get in, although some of the they've expanded the playoffs over the years and whatnot, but still, you have to have a very good team to get in. It's just the fact that some of these schools have, their offenses are more dynamic than what they have been in the past. You take like the Dovers and Garaways, they're able to put a lot of points on the board. And don't get me wrong, defense wins ball games, but you got to also put points on the scoreboard. And I think that's a reason why most of our teams are getting into the playoffs and making a little bit of run for themselves. I think that's a big reason right there.
Raj, when you talk about the teams getting into the playoffs, Jim, will sort of flip the coin over to you. It's very early, as in the season hasn't started early. But when you look, and you had a nice preview article in this past Sunday's paper, sort of teasing people for what will be the legendary Times Reporter high school football tab coming up next week. Who do you imagine some of the forerunners here in the area might be in terms of having legit opportunities to get into the postseason this year?
Well, like you mentioned in my article on Sunday, I think Garaway, you have to put them up there. They went undefeated in the regular season a year ago, won their first playoff game, couldn't get by Kirtland, who's been their playoff nemesis, but they're returning some good, solid players from that team. They lost a lot of good players from that team as well, but in talking with Coach Wallach, he feels his team is primed and ready to make another run. And then, of course, you've got Dover. Dan Ift, year after year, they lose a ton of talent, but they just reload. There's really not a downtime in the Dover program, and I think they're going to be very solid. Their biggest question mark at this point might be their quarterback position, but it's going to work out in Dover's favor, I believe. And then Ridgewood, you can't discount Ridgewood. They went 9-1. Their only loss last year was to Garaway. So, you have several area teams. New Philly, they have a lot of kids returning this year. So they're going to make some noise, I believe. It's always a fun time of year. Everybody has their hopes up at the beginning of the year. And usually by week 4 or 5, you start seeing teams separate, the good from the bad or the not so good. But it's always a great time of year.
Jim Haynes, sports writer from the Times Reporter, along with TR sports editor Roger Metzger, joining us on our high school football preview edition of TV2 Sports Talk. Roger, certainly since you began doing this in the print media, things have changed from a media perspective. I would call it drastically in terms of if you go to Crater Stadium or if you go to Woody Hayes Quaker Stadium or wherever on a given night, if it's a big game in this area, you'll have the TR there. You'll have web-only broadcasting units there. You'll have a couple of TV stations there, multiple radio stations. I guess from what you guys do on the print side, and of course now online with FridayNightOhio.com and more, how do you try and do everything that you do in terms of having coverage for all the schools in the area?
Well, it's a very difficult job to do. I guess in terms of Jim and I for print, our goal is to try to find something that not necessarily the radio or TV would know or pick up on. Like most of the games, I know most of the games you guys do, you do previews with coaches and stuff, but afterwards, sometimes you don't get a lot of coverage as far as the coaches go. That's where Jim and I try to get, reaction from coaches, from players, how things went, what went wrong, what went right, and whatnot. I think that's one of the biggest things that print offers that not so other mediums are able to do is that,
And of course, certainly, I guess the immediacy of what you guys do has changed in that, if you wanted quick, instant information, maybe you listen to WJER radio to get it, but now with the website and you guys tweeting and all that kind of stuff, you guys get that information out there just as quickly.
And I've seen you do the same thing. You're tweeting while you're broadcasting, man. I mean, it's that immediacy. Everybody wants to know what's going on right now, right this moment. And like I said, a lot has changed since I started in this business back many moons ago. But it's trying to get the information out to people and just doing our best to relay that information to people.
High school football coverage with TV2 here on Time Warner Cable, also on WJER Radio, and with our print bins, the Times reporter Roger Metzger, their sports editor, and Jim Haynes, sports writer. Coming up as this week's preview show for 2015 high school football continues, we'll talk more with Jim and Roger about what to expect in 2015 here on DMG Channel 2.
As a parent, we always want what's best for our child. In the case of one child, it may be going off to college. In another case, staying home and going to college. And yet, in other cases, it could be going right into the workforce. But how will they have the skills to do that? Buckeye Career Center has been the answer for one of our daughters. She's learning to do things with her hands that are going to be very valuable for her in the workplace. And we're excited we have Buckeye to thank for that.
Adults who return to Buckeye Career Center to continue their education usually have one goal in mind. They want the opportunity for a better job. The fact is, adult education programs at Buckeye Career Center are less expensive and provide greater opportunities for job placement following graduation. It's your future. Get the facts. Buckeye Career Center. We put people to work. Find out more about your future at buckeyecareercenter.org.
WJER and TV2 would like to introduce you to a new website, WJERTV2.com, where you can watch exciting high school football, soccer, and volleyball replays from TV2 Sports on your home computer, smartphone, or tablet. Also watch the latest episodes of TV2's original programming, Sports Talk, The Garden Girl, The Not So Shy Chef, Off the Record, and Medical Minutes, as well as catch up on local community news and search for local businesses. So make sure to check out the new WJERTV2.com community website where everything's local.
TV2 Sports Talk this week focused in on the kickoff to the 2015 high school football season, just days away. Our play-by-play coverage here on TV2 with Scott Robinson beginning Friday night, August 28th from Crater Stadium in Dover as Dover plays host to Cleveland Central Catholic. First replay set for Friday night the 28th at 10:30. Talking high school football with Jim Haynes from the Times reporter and TR Sports editor Roger Metzger. And Roger, for a second anyway, stepping outside of Tuscarawas County, up in Carroll County, Malvern with a coaching change, and the new coach is an old coach.
And meet the new boss, same as the old boss, as the Who once said. Yeah, Dave Tucci had to come back out of retirement, coaching retirement. Todd Shadle, the coach there the last 2 seasons, he decided to step down and take a job back at his alma mater at East Canton. So he's going to be teaching and being an assistant coach at East Canton, and they needed a coach. So Dave graciously, he's the AD now. After he left his coaching position, he graciously decided he'd like to come back and provide some stability to the program. So what better guy than to lead the Hornets than the guy he's led them to multiple playoff appearances and a deep run into the tournament that one year. And I mean, they're in good hands with Dave Tucci. That's darn sure.
Certainly Dave has a very good idea of what he's doing when it comes to the X's and O's of the game. Jim, wanted to ask you about a couple of teams that you mentioned earlier on in our opening segment with you guys. You talked about Ridgewood. Maybe one of the questions as it relates to Ridgewood is, what has John Slusser got to do to get his team to win some games in the postseason? Seems like they get there about every year. And boy, what a tremendous job that Matt Lancaster has done since taking over the Indian Valley program, was an assistant in Strasburg. And they may have been the best 8-2 team in the state of Ohio last year that didn't get in.
Right, yeah, let's talk about Indian Valley. I mean, they lost, both their games were, or both their losses were to undefeated teams, Garaway and Triway, and by a combined total of 8 points. So, I mean, I know I spoke with Coach Lancaster earlier last week, and, they still have a bitter taste in their mouth about that, but like he said, the whining is over. It's time to, strap it up and go out there and prove that they belong. And they're going to have a very good team. They have a good running back, Corey Carlisle, who got injured early last season. Probably would have rushed for over 1,000 yards along with Jake Davis, who is lost to graduation. But they have good pieces in place to make the playoffs again this year. And with Ridgewood, as far as winning a game in the postseason, it seems like they've just kind of been snake bitten. They're one score away, or they've had a turnover that has swayed the flow of the game. But John Slusser, he's going to have his kids ready. And they lose Caleb Tingle, they lose Zach Donnelly. That was a good 1-2 punch offensively. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out for them. But in my opinion, the IVC this year comes down to Garaway and Ridgewood. And Sandy Valley could surprise a few people too this year.
Roger Metzger from the Times Reporter, along with Jim Haynes, the gentleman you just heard from. And Roger, we were talking with Jim about, hey, what does Ridgewood have to do to win a game in the playoffs? I guess let's ask that question about the school that geographically, anyway, a little bit closer, New Philadelphia. When Matt Dennison got here, and I believe Coach is entering his 13th year at New Philadelphia, this was a program that was going 5-5 every year, quite honestly. They were losing to teams like Indian Valley, and that is no disrespect to Indian Valley, but when you look at the size of the schools, something that probably shouldn't have been happening. He's got that ship turned around every year, about 8-2. They get to the postseason. They won a couple of East Central Ohio League championships. What does Coach D have to have from his team this year to make it to the postseason and win, for what would be the first time in Philly history, win a game there?
Boy, I mean, like Jim said, they've just been kind of snake bitten. They've run up against a good Tri-Valley team a couple years back, 2 years in running. But they've got. I've looked at their roster. They've got some players this year. Logan Bitterkoffer is going to be the quarterback. He's got Peyton Spiker to throw to. They seem to be a team on the come. I mean, they've got some good players, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they can do this season. Like I said, once you get into the tournament, though, like Coach If says, once you get in the tournament, anything can happen. But you gotta make it happen. But I'm excited to see what New Philadelphia can do this year. I really am.
Quakers beginning their season on the road as they head for Canton Central Catholic, and certainly Jim Haynes. It couldn't get a whole lot more difficult. Now, Canton Central graduated a lot of people, but they were the state runner-up last year.
Right, yeah, it'll definitely be a big opening week test for New Philadelphia, kind of, a gauge of what they have out there this year. But like Roger said, they are loaded this year, and I look for them to really do well this season.
Plus, they get new lights.
Right.
Hey, well, good lights can only help, right, guys?
Absolutely, man.
Yes.
That's very important, of course. Coming up as we continue with our football preview edition of TV2 Sports Talk, we'll talk with WJER's Denny Trimmer about what he expects headed into the new season. And don't forget, you'll be able to follow what Roger and Jim, Darren Lottschlager, and everybody else are covering all season long as you check out picking up the newspaper. Yeah, I know you can read it online, but I still like to have the paper in my hands and be able to read it. You can go to FridayNightOhio.com. They do a great job, Roger Metzger and Jim Haynes. Coming up more on our football preview edition of TV2 Sports Talk on DMG Channel 2. This episode of Sports Talk is brought to you by J. Dempson and Son Concrete. After this rough winter, you may need to repair or replace your patio, sidewalk, steps, or driveway. If you're considering any of these projects, give J. Dempson and Son Concrete a call at 330-795-0169 for a free estimate. Keep your home looking its best with J. Dempson and Son, with over 55 years of combined experience making satisfied customers.
Well, I woke up to the sound of silence and cars were cutting like knives in a fist fight. And I found you with a tear in your eye, your head in the curtains and heart like the 4th of July.
You swore and said, we are not shining stars. This I know, I never said we are. If you're lost and alone, or you're sinking like a stone, carry on. May your past be the sound of your feet upon the ground. Carry on. Carry on, carry on. We are shining stars. Carry on, carry on. We are who we are.
TV2 Sports Talk, the high school football preview edition, rolls on DMG Channel 2. I'm Bill Morgan. We've had the opportunity to talk with our TV play-by-play voice of high school sports, Scott Robinson, and just got finished in a conversation with the Times reporters Roger Metzger and Jim Haynes on the print side of what's happening, and happy to be joined now by, from the WJER radio sports team, Denny Trimmer and DT. We could look back at 2014, no need to do that season in the history books, but 2015. We'll begin by focusing on the New Philadelphia Quakers and the Dover Tornadoes, our primary coverage teams for WJER radio. Certainly when you talk about Dover, this will be my 15th or 16th year I begin to lose track. This may be one of the biggest challenges Coach Ift has faced, not because they're not an outstanding program. That goes without saying, the Tornadoes are. With the amount of talented players they graduated from a year ago, Coach Ift, Ted Jones, and the rest of that great coaching staff do have challenges in front of them.
Oh, they sure do. And they've always been more of the reload rather than rebuild. And I think this is the first time I can remember, and I'm probably 5 years longer into this than you are, that they've really had a question mark at quarterback. Braden Ubel's going to get certainly the first chance to go through and make it happen. Great kid and a lot of athletic talent. He just doesn't have the experience. They've always seemed to be able to plug kids in that have been the guy you've seen coming up and you knew he was going to, because in 3 games the year before he got the chance to. And this is going to be an unusual year. You know, take away from that the outstanding senior class that they graduated, and you have more question marks on the field for Dover on both sides of the football than you had as long as I can remember.
Now, when you talk about those challenges, with the offense being what it is, the 5 wide that Coach Ift and company has used very successfully, does that present bigger challenges for the quarterback than a conventional turn around and hand it off and maybe throw it 35% of the time offense?
I think that was more conventional 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I think it's going to be fine. I think these kids come up playing that style. They're not going to ask Braden Ubel or whoever the quarterback is to step in and do things that he cannot do. They're going to say, here's our basics. Let's see what you do well, and we'll grow the offense from there. So you're going to see your bubble screens and your jet sweeps and all your stuff that you're used to seeing. It's just you're going to have different athletes in place, and I don't think it's a big problem whether it's this style or that. So that's the style they run. That's the style they've run in the foreseeable past, and he'll be fine. They will be fine in that regard. It's just getting used to seeing different bodies out there. Someone not named Amarella for the first time in a decade, and getting used to different guys on the field. You lose Corey Contini, who I said best player I've seen at the high school level in my 20 whatever years of coverage. That's going to be a hole you have to fill too. So enough about the quarterback. Now you're taking the preeminent wide receiver in the area, and there were some dandies a year ago when you look around. Connor Troyer at Garraway and Cade Cummings at Central Catholic. To say what Corey Contini did puts him up here above everyone that I've watched in the last 15, 20 years. That to me is as big a hole as you're going to fill or worry about filling than the quarterback.
WJER Radio high school football color analyst Denny Trimmer, our guest on our TV2 Sports Talk high school football preview edition. DT flipping to the other side of the Tuscarawas River and New Philadelphia and Coach Matt Dennison's team. One question they don't have this year is who's going to play quarterback.
They've got an outstanding quarterback coming back in Logan Biddecofer. It was phenomenal a year ago as a sophomore. So he's got the year in the system with the offense, with the way Coach Dennison likes to call things. The physical gifts are there, the height, the arm strength. Now you bring in that year of experience and seasoning, taking the hits and getting a feel for where holes are in zone coverages, being able to go through your progressions. I think he's primed for a fabulous year, but if this is going to be a New Philly team that, say, wins the ECOL, wins that first playoff game and advances, it's not necessarily, I assume you're going to get a high level of play out of Biddecofer. The if guy for me is Braden Young. At 6'2", a senior wideout, they love his hands. He has to have everything they hope he can have in terms of a senior season. Great kid, super athlete. Now he's going to have the opportunity to shine as the prime target in this offense. I think he really has to step into that role.
Talking Quaker football on TV2 Sports Talk. And DT, I guess on the other side of the football for the black and red, Seth Watson, their team in their opening scrimmage against Marlington, pitching the shutout against the Duke's first teamers. So certainly they've got some positives on that side of the ball as well.
Well, Logan Bidicoffer, you know what you're getting at quarterback. The best player on that team, probably Logan Ford. Defensive lineman extraordinaire, and we always joke because Coach Dennison will say, well, this kid's the best squat corner I've ever coached, or this kid's the best outside linebacker because he does. Logan Ford might be the best defensive player at any position he's had the privilege to coach over those years. Now, can Logan springboard what he did last year into a great senior season? I think so, and he's going to have some help. Good linebacking core, got guys on the outside holding receivers down like Ty Carter. I think this is a big, big year for the Quaker defense and a big year for Logan Ford.
Danny, certainly thanks for your time. We'll look forward to hearing you on the radio all season long on 1450 and seeing and hearing you here on TV2 Sports Talk in Week 3 when you call the Quakers and Massillon Perry.
Let's go.
It is all a part of TV2 Sports Talk and our best coverage of high school football. You've been watching our high school football preview edition on the Valley's best home for television sports coverage, TV2.